To start with, I'll let you know this video is inspired by one I just watched from Mr. Zach Bauer over at An American Homestead, talking about homesteading in tents. And the question I gotta ask for people who want to get into this lifestyle, who want to get on a homestead, is how bad do you want it? I know so many people, as Zach was pointing out, living in tents, living in campers. Sometimes it takes years. Sometimes it's through all the seasons. You know, so it's bad and it's snowing and it's cold and there's their family packed into a tent or packed into a camper. And what inspires me about these people and encourages me is that these are people willing to make short-term sacrifices for long-term goals. Now there will be people, and if you can do it, by all means do it. I think a good example would be Kevin and Sarah from Living Traditions Homestead. They left corporate jobs, they had a pile of money, they had saved up where they could, not worry about anything for like a year or more, just financially. I mean, they made some good moves to set themselves up for success. A lot of times, that's not what the average person is able to do. Sometimes people see me pretty much working with all these resources, all this junk, all these things that others have thrown away or were getting discarded, and it makes them feel relatable. It makes them feel like I'm relatable because essentially, poor folk ain't got a lot of money, that type of stuff. And in either of those situations, you're gonna have sacrifice. Unless you're just born into a bunch of money to either acquire it so you can kind of set yourself up ahead of time, kind of more in a style like I think Kevin and Sarah did over at Living Traditions Homestead, or if you're gonna do it kind of more like Mama Pepper and I. Either way, to get the type of money where you got that much breathe room and you can afford things and kind of build things and work on things and not have to worry about income for a moment because you have a savings like that. And I think that's how they did it. I forget. I've sat down, had a meal with them before, ran into them before, watched some of their videos before. I don't completely remember everything accurately. But either way, you're going to have sacrifice. To get that stuff ahead of time or to sit there without it and move off into the middle of nowhere. If you're not willing to make short-term sacrifices for a long-term goal, you will not achieve your long-term goals. To travel as we did 750 miles away from our home, to cash in my 401k, to quit the best job, the longest job, best pay and benefits and stuff and vacation and stuff that I ever had, to give all that up. Because what are those? Well, those are the temptations, pros and cons, that are going to hold you back. They're going to be there. If you want to be enticed with that and have that be your goal, you can. But if you have a contrary goal, then you can't be enticed with all that. You have to do something different. You have to be willing to sacrifice that and move on to a different life. That's what we did. And of those people willing to give it a shot, there's two types. You know what they are? Take a guess. What are the two types of people who are willing to give it a shot? To make all those short-term sacrifices with the intentions of succeeding at a long-term goal. Well, the two types that are willing to do that I'm aware of off the top of my head, are those who will succeed and those who won't. And guess what you have to do to find out which kind you are? You got to do it. I remember sometime after moving down here, meeting Zach Bauer and Jamie, and talking to them about things. A video from our channel has been coming up in my feed a little bit lately, which is, homesteading on grid, which is what we do. But initially we were going to go off grid. And I remember after hanging out and talking with them a bit and stuff, and my wife talking to Jamie a bit, I remember my wife telling me that, Jamie Bauer had said I think they can make it. That if we were going to, try to go off grid and do all these things, that she thought we seemed like the type who could succeed at it. Now, we did go on grid, but with all the other sacrifices we made the sacrifices and we made it through it. We never lived in a tent. We never lived in a camper. I know so many people who do. And then I also know a lot of people who do like the biblical feasts, including the Feast of Tabernacles, the Feast of Sukkot, where you're supposed to dwell in tents. And some people dwell in campers for that. But I can walk up to just hundreds of people in a valley between some hills somewhere observing the Feast of Tabernacles and think, you know what? Sometimes for like half the people, that living arrangement is not very different than their life currently. Because at home they live in tents on their property, or at home they live in campers. Or there was a time when they did, and they made those short-term sacrifices to set them up for success with the long-term goals. So here's the thing. If you wait for everything to be perfect in almost any situation, you're probably not going to do anything. Okay? A lot of people, I'm not ready to have kids yet. Yeah, you're never going to be ready. And if you feel like you are, and some people, feel like they are and then they do. Some people feel like they are and then they can't, What do you do then? Spend the rest of your life just spending all your money and time and effort going to different things to try to conceive, It's, the point is, a lot of things in life you've got to do if you want them done. I like to make the joke, well, when I was little, my mom told me I was somebody. And then when I grew up, everyone else told me somebody had to do it. Somebody's got to do it. And I'm like, man, she set me up. It's a joke, but the point is, somebody's got to do it. If something's going to get done, it takes somebody doing it, or that's not going to happen. Do you want to flee the city right now? Do you want to take stewardship of some land? Do you want to have a plot of ground where you can plant fruit trees and then 5 years from now be eating an amazing harvest off of them? Because if you do, you may not be able to do that where you're at. If you do, you may have to make sacrifices. You may have to make some adjustments to your life. And if your creature comforts, if your current situation basically, if you have a goal you're not willing to work for, then you have a goal you're not willing to accomplish. If there's something you want to achieve, but you don't want to sacrifice for it, you don't really want to earn it, you just want to have it given to you, you're not going to get there. The vast majority of the time, you're not going to get there. I would highly encourage people, if you're serious, and here's one too, if you're serious and you're married, you better both be on the same page. That's one thing that I have been so blessed with, and I do not take for any granted, is that with so many of the major life decisions that Mama Pepper and I have made, we've been on the same page, we've made them together, and hand in hand, in step with one another, we've pressed on towards those goals. It has been absolutely wonderful, and I wouldn't have it any way. The problem is a lot of people just don't get that. Whatever it is, make sure you're on the same page, because if you try moving forward without your spouse, there may be other things you wind up doing without your spouse. You're not going to want that if you want your spouse, The two shall be one, work together as one unit, move forward, working with one another. But know that it can be done, and those who do, there's often this kind of almost like weeding out portion. Is what I would almost call it, seeing people try to transition from the city to the country life. And what happens is a lot just don't make it. A lot head back where they came from. A lot they start running into troubles, and it just doesn't work. And if one tries forcing the other one, a lot of times that's not going to work well. Got to do it together. But a lot of them, give up together. And then there's a number who make it through. It can be. It can work. But if you make it through together, then there's a lot of other things that you can probably make it through together. A lot of people who, like even in their marriages, start running into some bumpy roads and then give up on that marriage. Guess what they didn't get? they didn't get the skill set to have a successful marriage. So when they're in their next relationship, and their next relationship leads to marriage and things starts going, well, they still don't have the skill set they need to have a successful marriage. And that's why you wind up with some people with so many ex-husbands or ex-wives. You got to get those skill sets. Mama Pepper and I made a lot of short-term sacrifices for our long-term goal and vision. Just the other day as I was sitting out in the woods not shooting any deer, I was just praising God that He gave us an opportunity and such a place to live such a life. Like, even when I'm not able to shoot a deer, we've still been allowed all this freedom and opportunity to live the life that we want. The life that we want is amazing. I'll tell you what, having some hot smoked, pretty much jerkified venison ribs, oh man, those things are so fantastic. Our venison jerky, absolutely fantastic. We just had some smoked chicken broth. That stuff is insane, where we smoked the chickens, then we ate the meat, and then we made broth with the bones. Insane, but all of that wonderful tastiness and all of this life and abundance is because we're able to have this type of situation. If you want this type of situation, if you want the confidence where, let's say I couldn't leave this homestead for 6 months, 6 entire months, would my family survive? I'm incredibly confident that we would survive. There would probably be really tough times through it, but there'd be times through it where I would say we were thriving at that moment. And of course, not leaving this homestead means no fish from the lake or anything like that either, you know. If we were not allowed to leave our property, I think we would thrive. I think we would do, or, you know, at times, I think we would definitely survive. There'd be times that we thrived. And I think if it had to take a year, I think we could do it for a year. We've got some supplies. One of those supplies, besides just having like food stored up, is the seeds, you know. This year I want to garden next year, like our lives depend on it. I always want to live like my life depends on it, but I want to garden like my life depends on it and see what happens. Get the family more involved. We'll see what happens, but make those short-term sacrifices. If you have a long-term goal, you're not going to get your long-term goal. If you say you want a homestead and you're not willing to quit your job, you're not willing to move, you're not willing to start off tough, you're not willing to maybe stay in a tent for a while, stay in a camper for a while, you're probably not going to get there. Just realize that. And you know what? If there's another way, and if you want to prove me wrong, then use it as a driving factor to get you where you want to be. Come back later and tell me I was wrong and show me how awesome it is the way that you did it. Cool, no problem. Absolutely would love that for you. But be willing, or it ain't going to happen. And guess what? If you make it through because of all those sacrifices, your life and your relationship, I mean, can you imagine just having your whole family thrown in a very tiny area, like a camper or a tiny house or a tent is? Boy, you get to live a lot of life. You get to really know your family. And then when you're in a more spread out thing, all of a sudden you can be like, whoa, this mobile home is huge, or whoa, this little house is huge, or wow, I've got a little more berth where I'm not constantly slamming into people every time I move because we got a little more room. And it's so easy to live with my wife and children because we used to live like, you know, a pinball machine. And we made it through that. That's all I got for you. Check out Zach's video if you want. I'll have it in one of the end screens. Maybe this one. Pop out.